Hello and welcome to MBA Waves. We are on the air, and today you're in store for a special episode as it is not only our 50th episode, but it is our 1 year anniversary of MBA Waves. So first of all, before we get started and introduce our guest, I'm going to let Bara take over for a second and just say her word for happy 1 year anniversary.
Well, that's 3 words. Happy 1 year anniversary is more than
4, maybe. Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a great year. It's been awesome working with Eric. Eric and I have not met in person. We've actually been we've been online friends for the past year producing this, and so it's one of the COVID silver linings. And it's been I can't wait to hang out in Paris. I don't know when that's going to be, but it's been a delight working on MBA Waves and helping all the people that we do help. I'm looking forward to continuing doing that for MBA hopefuls. There's so much to learn. There's so much I have to learn, so much they have to learn. And so it's just been a huge fun party every Tuesday.
Oh, we have happy anniversary from David, one of our original fans. Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
Yeah. So, all right. In light of 1 year anniversary, first of all, I am streaming live from New York City, my hometown. I'm in Long Island City at my awesome friend Maya's apartment, who has inflated some balloons to celebrate, and I have a party hat and a 1 year birthday cake. So everyone blow out the candle. All right. So that makes 1 year.
Awesome.
I also want to say special thanks to some of the people who were with us from the beginning, like Petia Whitmore, Avi Goodman, Al D was with us, to all of our guests that we've had throughout the last year.
Amazing.
Especially the repeat guests. My God, I've learned so much from you and had such a good time developing this project. And I'm going to take this hat off now. So I'll just forget it's there. And yeah, so as we always start, MBA Waves was founded by a group of coaches and experts in the whole universe of MBAs, people who are looking to do an MBA or business school in general. This is a great place to learn a lot of good stuff, free stuff, to network, to meet people, and yeah, to begin your journey. And today's episode 50, is called Employer-Sponsored MBAs Back to the Future, a fun title inspired by my friend and colleague and special guest today, Ray Letsky from InStride. Ray, hi.
Hi, Eric.
How's it
Delighted
going?
to be here. Thank you. This is an honor for me. Not only to get to be with you and to chat with you. We've been friends for so many years, but to be here for the 50th episode is a special treat. So I'm humbled and I'm delighted, and really just congratulations, both of you.
Thank you so much. So
Thanks.
Ray and I actually met through AFA, which is the Association of Fraternity Advisors, in something like 2002, 3.
Better memory than I do.
That's when I started the role at CW Post Long Island University. I was in charge of Greek life then. And was it in Columbus, Ohio, where we met?
It might have been. I think it was a Midwestern city. That sounds right.
Yeah, just a row two. And these conferences were every December. And fast forward a bunch of years after losing touch, we happened to be next to each other at an MBA fair in New York City. It all comes back to New York.
It does.
Working for Cornell at the time, was it?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're like, no way. And we reconnected, and here we are on MBA Waves. Now, Ray's been working for InStride for the last, how long?
Almost 3 years now. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and
Sure.
tell us about InStride,
Sure.
Throwaway.
Taking me back with that introduction, Eric, I appreciate it. Thank you. And yeah, my work at Cornell was with Cornell Tech, which is a small campus of Cornell University based on Roosevelt Island in New York City. It always comes back to New York City. I was born in New York, lifelong New Yorker, now on the West Coast, but based now in the Lake Tahoe area, coming to you from Reno, Nevada. But really, the school had a very unique 1 year accelerated MBA program that I was honored to represent as part of the S.T. Johnson Graduate School of Management. Prior to that, I worked at NYU as head of graduate admissions for their School of Engineering. Prior to that, both Pace University and Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. So I was institutionalized for a little over a decade working in enrollment management and admissions. But in 2019, made the leap for a couple of reasons. First, I prefer the weather on the West Coast, even though I love New York. Certainly, lifestyle change was in order. But also the really cool things that were going on at InStride attracted me. And Cornell and NYU had already been working along lines of trying to bridge the gap between industry and academe and find ways to create industry-focused education within graduate programs and in Cornell Tech space, specifically within an MBA program that were designed for entrepreneurs, that were designed for folks who wanted to create startups and really professionally geared practicum. So moving from that to sort of scale is where I joined InStride, which works exclusively with online programs. And the genesis story of InStride is a story some of your listeners may know, some of them may not, of Arizona State University working with Starbucks. And they actually just announced, I believe in Fortune, they had their largest graduating class at Starbucks of individuals working there who have earned their degree at ASU for free online. Through tuition benefits. So tuition benefits, Back to the Future, I love this title, are back. They were here a long time ago. Some folks may remember them. I'm happy to talk about what they used to be and what they are now. But InStride is leading the way in creating this employer-sponsored education, strategic enterprise education, we like to call it, where tuition, books, almost everything, in some cases everything, is paid for by the employer for the benefit of the employee.
Is that housing as well?
Well, because it's online,
right.
That's one of the benefits for both the employer and the employee is that they don't need to move.
Sure.
So hopefully, one of the things we hope is that the employer is being flexible with the employee and allowing them the time, whether that's at home or in some other way, to balance their work and their academic aspirations. But they thankfully don't really need to go anywhere. In some cases, they might need to for a clinical component, but not for a business program.
Okay, so for this specific example of Starbucks, we might be getting a little bit ahead, but since you brought it up, like these 300 or so people that graduated, I assume this is all an online, part-time MBA program, fully sponsored.
That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Eric. And it's interesting. I think some folks initially recoil when they think about it being online. And I think there are some misconceptions, potentially some stigmas out there about online degrees. In fact, I just put an article out on my LinkedIn about some of the myths around online MBAs. I was excited to be joining you today, so I was inspired. But really, these are learners who have been working full-time, who potentially didn't have the opportunity to earn a degree before they took their role at Starbucks. And because of their service, because they are eligible based on their employment, they've been given the chance to earn this online. Now, that also requires a lot more than the learner just going off and studying. The company is providing a lot of resources behind those learners having the opportunity and other folks learning about the opportunity to be a part of that program. But these are undergraduate, in the case of Starbucks, they're undergraduate degree-seeking learners.
Okay. And how long again, this is a very specific example. We're going to back out and look at the bigger picture in a moment, but I'm just very curious about this Starbucks bunch. How long did it take for them to complete this degree? And what is the rhythm? Is it like once a week or weekends or 1 week every month?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. Now, the first question is harder for me to answer because for online learners, unfortunately, time to degree is a much harder thing to measure, especially for working adult learners who are balancing a lot of commitments. Schools like ASU give learners a chance to take very few courses or really load up. So it
sounds like it's at their own pace.
It can be at their own pace. And in many cases, it's asynchronous online instruction that they can complete in their own time through a learning management system. And occasionally there are live virtual instruction sessions, but those are usually where it's like a flipped classroom, where the learner has gone through a whole bunch of material and they're getting together with their peers and the professor to talk about content.
Okay, interesting. All right, so let's step back a little bit and look at this a little bit more like big picture. Obviously MBA Waves is more centered around people seeking their MBA, but like spoiler alert, InStride works with people seeking degrees outside of the business world as well, as I understood. So we'll come to that in a minute. Very interesting, this idea of employer-sponsored MBAs, as you had come up with this title, Back to the Future. This is something we've not seen in a while. Like, as long as I've been in the whole MBA universe, apart from Japan, where employer sponsorship is kind of common, getting your MBA paid for by your employer is almost unheard of. So, like, what's going on here? Like, how have sponsored MBA programs been making a comeback? You mentioned this example of Starbucks, but what's driving this?
Yeah, let's talk about MBAs specifically, because you make a really excellent point that it is sort of unheard of. There was a time way back when, where executives were given opportunities to attend, usually programs that were designed specifically for them. Either through industry partnerships with specific business schools, or where there was a potential faculty relationship with some kind of organization. You would see this happen in economics and finance. You would see this potentially happen in technology a bit, but these were reserved for very few high potential executives, usually folks who were not really what I would call your traditional MBA bound student. These were senior folks who were probably getting this as a perk, more than as a credential they were looking to advance their career with. It's softened a little bit, I think, more recently. For example, my experience at Cornell, working with the Cornell Tech MBA, was that there was a group of learners from MasterCard, and they have a relationship where MasterCard will send about 5 learners a year to Cornell Tech to go through this on-campus, highly selective MBA program.
A more traditional MBA in this sense, it sounds like.
Exactly. And even though it's got really cool entrepreneurship stuff, it's 1 year, it's accelerated, it's in New York City, for all intents and purposes, a traditional MBA experience from the S.E. Johnson Graduate School of Management with some cool tech stuff included. But what I learned in watching that experience is that success for both Cornell and for MasterCard was 5 learners a year. And that's great if the purpose of the program is to inspire a certain very narrow group of high potential executives. But what I began thinking about and what InStride has done is to say, well, how many employees at a company like Banner Health or Banfield Pet Hospital could benefit from a degree? How many employees across a large tech organization could benefit from an MBA regardless of where they are in the organization? And what does that mean in terms of scale? It means it has to be online. It has to be geographically distributed. And we probably need lots of different kinds of options of MBAs. It can't just be served by one institution. So that's the model we've built, whereby a corporation would come to us and we would present them with our network. And there are about a half dozen MBA programs within our network now. And we encourage them to provide all of those to their learners tuition free, and say, you decide which one of these you can get into, which one fits your career goals, which one fits your lifestyle choices, all the reasons a learner would pick an MBA, but with the understanding that it's paid. So that's where we are now.
So I have a quick question. So you said you have a half a dozen in your sort of portfolio now?
That's right.
And are there many more MBAs that are online, that are out there, that you have someone on staff that's going out to see if you can actually come up with a particular attractive program for them? Or how does it work?
That's a really great question, Barra. And I think it depends on a few things. We're trying to not build a marketplace, because we could very easily say, anybody who wants to be a part of the InStride network, come on in, and we'll do that. There's an intersection between quality and demand. And there are different drivers on each side. We've found that we really don't want to have competing MBA programs in the network. So I'll give you some examples of how we've differentiated. One of our MBA programs is entirely in Spanish, from Universidad Tecmilenio in Mexico. And it actually is very innovative. And it has potentially 0 textbook costs associated with it. It's actually very low cost. So it's a really cool opportunity, but the learner has to be wanting to earn a Mexican credential, wanting to take their MBA in Spanish. Another example would be ASU's program at the W.P. Carey School of Business, which is an incredible online MBA program. And I'm sure they would say that everybody should be choosing that program in our network. But they're very selective when you look across the spectrum of online MBA programs. Unfortunately, they can only admit about half the learners who apply to that program. So you can imagine, with the volume increases in online MBA applications, how many applicants that really is that get denied from an online MBA at ASU. So also looking for other ways for learners who maybe aren't admissible to that program to find other pathways, looking for MBAs that maybe have specific industry focus or an industry partnership.
Sure.
We know that there's an employer regionally that is already looking at that partner. That's kind of how we're deciding, but we're trying to not make it everybody and anybody. We've unfortunately had to tell schools, we can't work with you for one reason or another, which is difficult.
Right. Do you need a GMAT or GRE for all of these programs?
No. And that's one of the great things. For some you do.
Not for me.
Well, it's a great thing for some learners,
Sure.
right?
No, it is.
So
Absolutely.
I would say that the GMAT prep part of this is necessary for the selective programs.
Hmm.
The less selective or more open enrollment programs, I
Hmm.
would say, and the programs that are really looking for ways to pull out all the stops for an adult working learner, maybe with balancing, raising kids, working one or two jobs, dealing with whatever, having less admission criteria, it just makes it easier for there to be a throughput in their application funnel. They're looking for that kind of throughput. But I think for most working adult learners, not having to do the GMAT is viewed as a positive. I think if they're
Sure.
given this choice, it's kind of a burden already to just apply
Sure.
in some cases.
In the test prep world right now, there's a lot of schools that are test optional. I don't know if this is fun. This is probably, you've seen this. And I think that what's interesting is that it might appear as a relief for many students to not to take these standardized tests, but a lot of these schools might still look at your score, and it might actually be the deciding factor just to bump you in, even if they are not exclusively making all students take the test. But so it's a very dynamic field right now. This, and I wonder how it's going to play out in the next several years when schools and folks start to look at some of the other pieces in the application process, like essay help and whatnot. But no, I think it's super interesting and important for people to consider this when they're looking at schools. Like, if they want one less thing on their plate and they don't want to commute and they don't want to move, online programs seem to be a great and awesome option.
And in this particular model, one less loan to pay back, like a massive loan.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Which is huge.
I'm very
So
proud of the fact that we've saved hundreds of millions of dollars worth of debt already. So that is that. And your point, just to respond, I think is really well taken about improving the chances for admission. I strongly encourage it just as sort of an exercise to consider when looking at an MBA program, to consider
Yeah,
broadly the set of criteria that are necessary, and because you never want to exclude early, because then you just limit your options.
absolutely.
I think it's a good rule of thumb for sure.
Mhm.
so we've talked about how, like, when you were with Cornell, there were about 5 people coming in from, what company was it?
MasterCard.
MasterCard, right? And now it's expanding. So there have been funded MBA programs for a long time by companies. But what's changed? Why are companies thinking about, okay, we want to get many more people, at this higher level of education? What's the incentive? What's the added value for the company? Why are they willing to do this?
Sure. Great questions, Eric, and a couple of reasons. I think this is the result of a trend that's been going on for a long time. I don't know that anything has really changed. I think things have been accelerated, particularly by the pandemic. And you've had this incredible experience. You're at your 50th episode. You've never actually met, and this is the world that we're living in. It's incredible, right? So this accelerated an acceptance of this type of format of learning and engagement. So that led to companies saying, hey, this is an actual tool we can use, particularly when we have employees sitting at home and we are running out of ways to engage them productively, or engage them in things that give them a strong affinity for the organization, or to provide them with upskilling and reskilling opportunities that will allow us to put them in the new roles that we need to fill, because the role they're in right now is irrelevant because of what happened over the last 3 years, or less relevant. And I think in addition to that, another really important component is understanding that creating opportunities for learners speaks to diversity, equity, and inclusion. That if I'm a chief talent officer, or if I'm a chief human resources officer, I'm thinking about recruiting and retaining top talent from diverse populations. I want to create a welcoming environment, of course, but I also want to create opportunity for those individuals, particularly individuals who have come from underrepresented, marginalized, or frankly stigmatized populations, to give them an opportunity to gain valuable resources for themselves, for their career, but that they get to keep. I mean, my grandmother used to say to me, one of the best things about education is no one can take it away from you. So it is really an investment by a company in an employee at whatever level, if they choose to give an MBA or just an undergraduate degree out to an employee, to say, we want to be your hero. We want you to be loyal to us because look how quickly people are jumping jobs. Look how hard it is. I just read somewhere that in the first 6 months, people are leaving jobs at like 50% right now. It's an incredible turnover because we have this so-called great resignation. So I think in that environment, you just see this demand for like, we need to find a way to engage employees. I'm sorry, Eric.
Oh, no. It's just commenting. It's a kind of a historic moment. And I think it's very timely. Well, it's maybe not the right word. Starbucks was an early adopter of this idea. And it's, what's going on with Starbucks these days, what you see in the media, a lot of unhappy employees. They brought back the former CEO. Well, it's his third time in the position. And he is really taking a very grassroots approach, it seems like, to listen to people, to go into stores and really understand and what their gripes are, basically. But InStride is relatively young. It's about 3 years old, right? So I don't know if you have an answer to this question, but I'm like wondering, have people who have gone through these programs seen upward mobility thanks to their new skill sets? What have we seen as far as ROI in terms of the perspective of the employee?
Sure. I think a couple of things. We certainly have, in the process of creating these programs with our corporate partners, designed them in a way where managers and even the CEO are involved. So, for example, we try to create the program in such a way that the CEO is the sponsor, or a C-level person is the sponsor, and they're sending out communications. So they're actively getting information about who's doing what. So they're finding out, hey, this individual has applied to and been admitted to the MBA at the University of Memphis. And we use that as an opportunity to try and give them, you should be communicating with these learners. Same thing with graduation, right? When we know we get an advance warning, there's a learner graduating, we know a busy manager may not be paying attention to that. Frankly, they may have put it out of their mind that their employee is doing a degree online because they don't want to be thinking about the time that they're probably spending on that degree. But we certainly want them to be able to celebrate that with the employee and recognize that they have gained a credential. Beyond that, we look for ways for learners to give us feedback all the time about the skills they've acquired. Because believe it or not, the majority of the educational options that learners are picking right now are not degrees. If I were to look broadly across all of InStride, they're picking short courses, stackable certificates that might eventually go into something like an MBA. But the short form skills-based credentials are super popular right now. So when a learner goes through an InStride program, they usually have a very targeted outcome in mind and a skill that is either for the job they're in, or potentially for a transition within their company. We hope not to leave their company. That would be the unhappy path where they finish their program and then they take their new credential and they leave their employer. That's what we're trying to avoid that. So I think on both sides, we're trying to foster understanding of what the learner is doing, what that means for the organization, and how everyone should be excited about it.
Okay.
But we don't actually have yet, to your point, 3 years of data. We don't have here's how many graduates have come through and said, but we have upward trends on the data we do have.
That's good. That's a good sign. That's a good start. Well, we have to keep an eye on that. I did ask you, I'm not really sure if I got enough of an answer, but I was asking about the duration. I know it's hard to answer, but estimated, is it usually like a year, 2 years? What are we looking at?
So it's really hard to say, Eric, but I'll try to give you an estimate. I think for a learner doing an undergraduate degree, you're talking about 3 to 5, maybe more, depending on how many credits they have. For an MBA, for a master's degree, a learner who is really motivated could do it in a year or two. If they want to spend 3 nights a week online doing stuff. I mean, it's doable on their own time frame in a lot of cases. So just, for example, I go back to ASU because they're our founding university partner. But their programs are structured in such a way where a learner who really wants to load up and has that benefit from their employer could be taking 2 classes every quarter and paying them out kind of like a normal on-campus student would in terms of timeline.
Okay. No, that's good. I think it's helpful for people to understand what the time, expectation would be and so forth. So that means for those undergrad learners, you said 3 to 5 years, right? So have you had any graduating classes yet for undergrads? Because you've been around for about 3, right?
Well, a couple, like you just read about the Starbucks graduates, it's their largest graduating class for ASU. Yeah, those are undergrads. So those are the kinds of folks we've seen graduating. We've had a few graduates from other companies as well, but the numbers are not what Starbucks has, because Starbucks has been doing this a lot longer. It's in the teens for some of our other corporate partners right now, but and it's also not just ASU. That's across City University of New York, University of Memphis, many other university partners that we have.
I was
Okay,
in
so
a grad program at the City University of New York.
Oh yeah.
I was yeah. I didn't stay in. It was a PhD program in art history at the grad center.
Oh wow, that must have been so cool.
It was amazing. It was amazing. I studied with.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
I think Bar is frozen.
Oh no, it was such an incredible experience. It froze her.
Yeah. There's
Oh, I
another New
think I
York.
froze.
Yeah, you're back. Okay, great.
I'm back. Anyway, it was great. I studied with Robert Storr, curator, and it was wonderful.
How cool.
It was great. Great school.
Nice. Yeah, so what I wanted to ask you is when Starbucks or Uber or whatever company sends over those 300 something undergrads or however many to do an MBA, are they mixing with folks in that online undergraduate program from other companies or a general population of online students who just signed up on their own? And same thing for the MBA. Are they mixing with other MBA online MBA students that year? Are they kind of like in the cohort, like their batches only fellow Starbucks employees or fellow Uber employees and so forth?
It depends. So I think for the most part, it's usually the former. So, for example, for the undergraduate learners, they are taking classes alongside other learners from not just undergraduate applicants who will become online learners at ASU, but other companies that are
Okay.
sending learners to ASU. For MBA programs, it depends on what we're talking about. If a company wants to send a cohort together, that's possible because there are some cohortized programs that we offer. But because there are many cases where it's an asynchronous program or it's a program where a learner is expected to be somewhere in the world, but there's no real expectation of synchronous meetings, those programs are likely not going to be like that.
Okay. Okay, so it's possible for a company to decide they want a cohort to exist only of people from that company, and in which case, I think I'm going to ask. I guess they are able to really customize that MBA program. It's really, adapted to Starbucks or Uber's whatever needs, and maybe the business cases that they study are in-house cases, or do they look outside? Like, what
That's
happens there?
creative. That's definitely interesting. I actually think there's definite opportunities for collaboration. I'll say that. We've had
Yeah.
conversations where, and I wouldn't say it was something that would be done for like academic credit, but where a university faculty member might collaborate with a corporation to deliver some kind of specialized training. That would be the kind of thing. But I think you can. There are other examples of this. Like for example, Harvard Business School online doesn't deliver MBAs, but they have these sort of short form certificates that can stack together into a credential of readiness for an MBA. So that's not for credit either, but it could be used for credit. It's like one of those squishy things. So I think that there's this sense that if we're going to really customize the content, we have to decide whether or not we want to award credit for it. I think what's more likely is a company would create a cohort, and that cohort would sort of be handed over to the university, and the faculty members would individually decide, can I substitute this for that? Can I make it more relevant to these folks? Because I know I have an audience of entirely folks from pick your corporation. That kind of commitment is much more like the original tuition benefit programs that we were talking about, like Back to the Future. The difference now would be that when you scale and you offer this to maybe hundreds of employees across dozens of work sites, the cohorts become much harder to manage. Like Harvard Business School Online does that with a beautiful LMS that they built for their online certificates. But for an MBA program at scale to do that might be a little hard.
Sure. Because the one thing I'm thinking about next is very much about the peer-to-peer learning, right? And so there's an advantage, I think, to learning from people from other companies, like other ways of thinking about business, other challenges they face, other best practices that they can adopt into their companies. So there's that. And on a bigger scale or large, more macro way of thinking about just networking in general. So how is that achieved in an online model? Is there any kind of hybrid activity happening? Are there in-person moments? What happens?
Absolutely, it's a combination of all. So, and across different kinds of programs too, because just kind of back up for a second, I keep using ASU as an example. I'm an alum. Can't do the thing. Go Sun Devils. But they have they have all kinds of different schools. So, like the Thunderbird School of Global Management also has an online program that's very competitive.
Yes.
All of these programs have that peer-to-peer component. Whether that's a cohort that's been created because they all enrolled at the same time, so they're all meeting together. Maybe they're not from the same company, but they're going to be engaged in the same content together, so they'll have those peer-to-peer interactions. They'll be looking at the same cases, and they'll be presenting together. So I think that for folks who are thinking the online MBA is just going to be really easy, and it's actually probably not even worth the money because like you don't even get to meet anybody. Some learners might be really surprised to discover the time commitment is heavy, but it's asynchronous, or it's requiring you to kind of negotiate with your peers based on which time zones you're all in, what time will work for you all to actually meet. That's where we'll come to an employer and say, give your employees a little bit of flexibility, right? They've got a cohort with people in Dubai and people in France or wherever, and they got to figure out a time to meet. So if you can't make that 8:30 meeting once a month, let them do it. They're on this mission. So trying to be flexible, trying to give the managers the tools to be able to understand that that kind of thing is going on. So
it also treats people globally. You have to deal with people in different time zones like we are right now. Normally I'm in France, so it's even more spread apart. But yeah, I think it's a good training for the future of work.
I would also add, just as a component of this, there is an expectation, right, of what an on-campus traditional MBA experience includes. And some of those things you just cannot do online. So I'll be the first one to admit that there are big differences between an online MBA and an on-campus traditional MBA. And if someone really wants that experience, maybe an online MBA isn't the right pick for them. Sure. But I would also say that if we're thinking about costs, we're thinking about a new paradigm of work, we're thinking about virtual, you can argue that this is a different kind of MBA experience that might suit a learner who's really looking just to get the skills and maybe some networking that's important for them. But what they really want to acquire is the credential, or for some other purposes, maybe the different place in their career. So just knowing that thing admissions officers all say that you have to find the right fit, that kind of holds true for online MBAs too. I think for some learners who don't really want to be forced to speak with a sign in front of them in a classroom, they might enjoy being able to talk to their peers in a computer mediated way.
I mean, there's loads of people who, for whatever reason, they might have children or parents to take care of, or it's a financial reason or a medical reason, that an in-person MBA is not an option. And so having access to the education and the whole experience online is a great door opener for so many. Barry, I think you had a question about oops. I think your dog has a question.
That's a big dog. My dog's got some questions. I had a question, hold on. Let me scold it.
She looks pretty pleasant while scolding, actually.
Yeah, that was impressive.
Your dog's a lip reader.
Yeah, my dog. Well, this is a foster dog, actually. But I guess my question had to do with, once someone's in this program and most things are covered, but even if not, what other recommendations do you have for students to look for helping with funding? Like, I know that there's the Foundation Center in New York City, and they have like this library, and they've got a really extensive online repository of different scholarships and funding that's available. But I think that students sometimes you actually don't have to look that far out. You can look at your religious institutions, your civic engagement. Like, there seems to be a lot of ways to get funding that don't cover all of your all of your fees, but do you recommend other places for students to look in addition to going through InStride's programs, or if they wind up not being able to be admitted to a program through you, what are the next steps? Maybe those are 2 or 3 questions.
Sure. No, I think this is a great question. And I think cost is important here. And one of the challenges we have is that there are times where employers will want to limit the amount of tuition benefit they'll provide to the amount that is not taxable, which is in the US right now, $5,250. I believe it's been that way since the 1950s, 40s.
Well, we're going back there, so, right?
Yeah, well, in some ways we are. I mean, if money was worth that, it'd be great. But I don't know about that. I think we're going back in some pretty awful ways, but I agree.
We're not gonna go there.
No, we won't go there. But anyway, I think that when that happens, learners need to find either a way to supplement
exactly
the benefit or to balance what options they're picking. So to answer your first question, I think looking for external sources of funding is always a good idea, but it becomes increasingly challenging when the number of applicants out there for everything has just grown exponentially.
Yeah.
And I think I'm a fan of looking for opportunities where costs are sort of a part of it. And what I mean by that is I've always encouraged folks when they look at graduate schools not to always get their heart set on the graduate school that is the top choice. They should be thinking about the graduate school that gives them the most money. And they should go there because it doesn't matter in the end. So thinking about your choice of a program in terms of the costs is another reason why I actually recommend online MBAs to other kinds of learners, because they are priced at a fraction of some on-campus programs. Mm-hmm. And they contain the same content in some cases taught by the same faculty as the on-campus programs.
Right? This is something
exactly the same accreditation. And here's the kicker. It doesn't say anywhere on the degree that it's an online degree. It's the exact same MBA the folks who sat on campus got. It just was delivered through a different modality. So an option for some learners who are concerned about the costs, who don't have the money, is to be looking at these alternative online options. And then to your point, Eric, even beyond credentials that are accredited, I actually believe that if a learner is really stuck and doesn't have the funds to proceed, there are some very low cost, in fact, no cost options out there. They can even check with their current employer. Google Career Certificates. Google is offering these online certificates that many schools will take for college credit now. And they're offering, I think, 100 spots to anyone who wants them from companies. So there are ways for learners to begin acquiring skills and to begin turning that education wheel with very little resources without having to go look out, find a million scholarships.
Right.
I'm a big fan of starting with, think about how much it's going to cost and start playing with that. Say, okay, do we have to spend $110,000 for the MBA? Maybe we don't. Maybe we can spend $60,000. Maybe we can spend $80,000. Are there options like that? What would that mean? And that's how I would approach that. I'm not sure it's really answered your question, but
well, to your point, actually, also you mentioned something earlier. I saw during COVID, because I took a bunch of courses just for fun during COVID. And even, I don't know if it was Coursera or one of these other online programs, and they had classes from Harvard Business School, and they had classes. I went to University of Michigan undergrad and grad school. They had people from there teaching courses that you could take for much less than what my tuition was, right? Like substantially less. So, and what an amazing opportunity that you can, business, humanities, really anything. You can take courses online now. It's so exciting.
And here's the crazy and wild thing about that, and that's a great example, Barra, but they're even going further than that to say through ACE evaluation, or frankly, just because schools are getting very innovative and creative, schools are awarding credit for these things, these non-credit credentials from companies, work experience, reviewed by portfolio. All of a sudden, you've got a quarter of your MBA credits.
It's amazing.
There are MBAs out there that are now 32 credits. So when you start thinking about this, you assemble this, you can be done really quickly, and the cost savings are enormous when you think about the cost per credit hour for some of these institutions.
Yeah. I think that's great for undergrad also, right? Like that's a really great, actually, this is something I'm going to talk to a few people about
It's great.
Accreditation, and you're obviously part of the alumni network. Say it's ASU. If you've done an MBA, you're an ASU alum, and you have access to all the alumni perks and benefits. And what about career services? Do they have access to that? If like down the road, like a couple of years afterwards, they're like, oh, I want to pivot to a new job in a new country or state in the US, and they'll have help from career services.
So I'll answer that question with a testimonial. So like where I got bored during the pandemic and started taking classes and got sick of the fact that I was taking these Coursera things that weren't for credit. So luckily I worked for InStride, and they said, would you like to do an online master's for free? And I said, sure. So I went to ASU and I did another master's degree, and I am a graduate, and that's how I got the degree I have. And I get the alumni magazine, the degree on the wall doesn't say anything about online on it. I get donation requests just like any alum. I get invited to events.
You get tickets to the games?
I haven't asked for those yet, but I get to chat with folks. I was talking to the dean of the communication school, who's an amazing person. So I mean, you are just like any other alum, and I think for the learner who's okay with the modality, it's just a slightly different experience, right? Like to celebrate my graduation, one of my classmates who actually was in Tempe took a picture when all of our names went across the scroll on the side of the building. And that was my celebration of my graduation, that I got this picture of what it looked like on campus, even though I'd never been there.
Nice. Still, you going to go?
No, I've been there since. No, since then I've been plenty of times, but at that point I had never been.
Nice. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
For another
thank you. Hey, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Always a party. Always a party.
It's a party. There's always a party. There's always a reason to party. Look, we're about 40 minutes into the episode, and we've learned a lot. But like some of the major takeaways is like, and here's what I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. If you are looking for a way to get your MBA that is going to be a lot cheaper, a lot faster, to be able to do it from distance, you can get it sponsored by a company that has to have a relationship with a company like InStride, right? So if you're like listening to this episode and you're thinking, this is possibly interesting for me, what's the best thing for them to do?
It's a great question, Eric, and I'll just amend your beautiful summary with one addendum that it doesn't have to be InStride. Like I love InStride, and that's where I work, and they're amazing. We have an incredible company, but there are others out there doing some similar things. And then there are companies that have just partnered with a local university. So consider those state institutions nearby that have business schools that have really great programs. What can you do? You can talk to your talent and HR team. If you're a working professional and you're thinking about going back to school, don't think about it in terms of quitting. Start by going to them and saying, what's possible? Because I've also heard of examples where companies, in an effort to help create something like this, they will just kind of build it on demand. So if you have an opportunity in mind, if you have an online program in mind that you think would be good and you've researched it, bring that plan to your HR and benefits team. See what they think about it. See if it's feasible. Because you might be surprised by the answer. A lot of companies are doing this.
Yeah. Good. That's what I wanted to hear. It's great. I mean, in most of the case, you said there's not really a requirement. They have to stay in working for the company for years afterwards. These are, opportunities that can help you, well, not only upskill, but move up within the organization, but also those skills are transferable if, in the future you wanted to take it to another company. And being that you're part of this network, this alumni organization from XYZ school, you have the credentials. It sounds like a really great alternative pathway. Could become the mainstream pathway one day.
We hope it does. And look, we also hope that those employees will stay with their companies too. We know they'll acquire skills and they'll really improve exponentially improve their career outlook, especially just going back and considering those individuals who are earning an undergraduate degree. Consider the career options that are before them once they finish that endeavor. But we hope they think of the company as the hero and they gain an affinity. And that's kind of the purpose behind some of these. It's to help grow that affinity, to help keep employees engaged. But if they do leave, in some cases, companies will say you have to serve a certain amount of time because they really want to get back some ROI. But we always encourage companies, don't put restrictions on it. This is to help make your employees happy, to uplift them, to give them new skills. Don't put restrictions on it that make it more challenging. Give them all the tools they need to be successful.
It reminds me a little bit of like unlimited paid vacation time, where it's like, we're not going to put this limit on you, but because they've created this culture where they're sort of getting something from the company that they actually just they want to stay at the company, or they want to not take too much time off. Like they're committed to their company, and if they feel valued and that they're gaining experiences and knowledge and so forth and opportunities for advancement to move up in title and salary, why leave? Like.
And be proud of it, right? And to know that your employer is willing to invest that much money in you, let alone the time and the emotional impact for you and your family. When you watch some of the learner testimonials that we've received, videos of learners talking about, and they're crying, their kids are crying. I mean, it's like you've transformed a family's life just by giving them a little bit of love and a little bit of a chance to prove themselves. So it's so cool.
Because like companies, I mean, the cost for recruiting, like headhunting and training, it's enormous. So it makes sense to put their money somewhere that's going to proactively keep people around and not have to go through that process. So it makes a lot of sense.
100%, especially today.
Any more questions for Ray over here?
No, it's a lot of food for thought. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my honor to be here for your 50th episode, and congratulations again. This is super exciting, and anytime you want to have me back, I'd be thrilled.
I think we should like have you back, certainly, to be able to find out some of the MBA grads and like where they wind up and what happens with them. I think
they know, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool.
Well, stay tuned.
Your anniversary then.
Yeah, next anniversary.
Well, thank you so much, Ray. Of course, thank you, Barra, and thank you for everyone in the audience who stuck with us for about 45 minutes today. Just a reminder, MBA Waves is every week on Tuesday, 7 p.m. Paris time, 1 p.m. New York time, and 10 a.m. San Francisco time. Next week's episode 51 is about letters of reference, who to ask, when, and how. And guest speaker her name is Pamela, but I cannot remember her last name. Barra, you know her? She's an AGEC as well.
I'm not sure who Pamela Jaffe?
Yeah, well, last week, as you know, is the AGAT conference, the Association for National Graduate Admissions Counselors, and met a lot of great people, both at the schools as well as other admissions consultants. And Pam said she wants to join us, so she'll be joining us next Tuesday. Surprise! And anyway, well, thanks to everyone, and have a great week, and see you next Tuesday.
Bye. Thanks, Ray.
Take care, folks. My pleasure.
Bye bye.